Yo, boys, welcome back. It's the weekend. What a fantastic summer it has been here at Star Spangled Gamblers, your OG podcast about betting, real money on politics. Usually the summertime, a very quiet season, especially in an election year. I feel like it's just been one gift after the next from sort of the news cycle gods for us to talk about. A lot of money going through betting accounts. Am I making this up? This has just been a great couple months.
Yeah, and I mean, as of like a few minutes ago, I mean, we may have had actually the trade of the year, which is a guy in the comments, like Baby Yoda or something. He was saying he bought 5,000 shares of Mario Draghi to leave at 1%, which is now basically a 50-50 market. So yeah, just a lot going on.
Yeah. Okay. So getting you caught up. So this is our weekend drinking games. We will rehash a lot of what's happened this week, and we will talk about why we are going to be placing bets based on that. So we're going to have some fun going through this format, but very eventful week. We have Mario Draghi resigning. That's the Italian premier, who most of you never even think of. Very unexpected. This triggers a lot of markets in a foreign sense. We have Joe Biden looking just bottomlessly terrible in polls. That has implications. Trump talking about getting into a presidential race. There's just so much happening right now. This is just it's just a fun summer, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't remember the last time we recorded, but I was glad to see that we both finally exited the Boris Johnson trade on a profit. That one was quite a volatile one.
What? Yeah, shout out iSavage. Always sell at 90.
Yeah. Well, I meant even before that. I mean, it was looking uncertain until then overnight he just kind of resigns. Hat tip to Paul Abadi on that too. He was ahead of the curve on that for a while.
That was a trade that really tested my intestinal fortitude. And I'll be honest, I didn't make nearly as much money as I should have because I just, after months and months and months, like doubt started to creep in. And of course, Boris Johnson, the English, British, UK Prime Minister, also on his way out. And we'll have more. Actually, we're going to have KJ on later in this podcast to talk about that a little bit from Westminster.
Yeah, sounds good. And I'm certainly not like the biggest degen when it comes to just watching C-SPAN or whatever, but I will tell you that I have watched every single minute of the January 6th hearings, plus like way too much MSNBC, so we can get into that too.
I feel like that makes you a different type of degen if you're just like butt chugging like woke porn, basically.
Well, we'll get into how to characterize it.
Okay. All right. So three drinking games today. Would you rather? You remember that you get two bad choices or two good ones. Pick the lesser of two evils. We're going to do two truths and a lie. That game is self-explanatory. And then we'll finish with everyone's favorite, kill, fuck, marry. So yes, we're going to kill, fuck, marry the news this week. Only rule there is that we don't talk about actual human beings because political violence in any form is bad. We can agree on that, right, Pratik?
I certainly can. Whether or not Maxine Waters can, I don't know.
I can make probably a discrete list of politicians who probably disagree with us on that, and some of them hold pretty powerful office. So that is neither here nor there, but worth talking about. All right, well, do you want to do it? I think I'm going to lead us off with a little would you rather and start with the House of Joe Manchin and Joe Biden, kind of brothers from another boomer mother. How's that sound to you?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Would you rather? Drinking games. Okay. So this week in Washington, Joe Manchin, the real Senate Majority Leader, let's be honest, Joe Manchin has breathed new life into Build Back Better, that kind of weird Frankenstein spending bill that the Democrats have been trying to get through. He's also subsequently revoked Hope at the same time. So markets aren't really buying this story that Joe Manchin, the moderate Democrat, is working clandestinely with Chuck Schumer to pass this bill before August recess. They're not buying it. Only giving it a 35% chance of happening, despite the press saying that this is a thing. In other words, that means that bettors think that there's a 65% chance that Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, the two moderate Dems, are probably going to kill it again. So with that in mind, speaking of 65%, Just this past week, the New York Times and Siena released a poll that showed that 64% of Democrats don't want Joe Biden to run for president again. What a number. 64%, once again, don't think he's their guy in 2024. And that's pretty much what bettors believe on Predict It, where Joe Biden only right now has 34% chance of being the nominee in 2024. So bettors, again, giving 35 cents a share to bet that Joe Biden will be the Dem nominee. So, okay, so now I got to ask you, would you rather, having heard all of this, would you rather bet 35 cents per share on Build Back Better passing? That's on Predict It. Or would you rather bet 35 cents per share that Joe Biden is the Democratic nominee, even now as people are telling him to get out of the way?
I would say definitely Biden. I mean, in terms of reconciliation, I don't really have a strong view as to why the market price might be wrong. I mean, on the one hand, I think betting against politicians wanting to spend more money, especially when the Democrats are in the kind of position that they are, is kind of a dicey situation. On the other hand, right coming on the heels of a announcement of a 9.1% inflation rate, I mean, if Manchin ever needed an excuse not to vote for this, he got it right there. So I don't really know what's going on there. Well, I guess I can get into Biden, but I think probably you have more evolved thoughts on that than I do. Reconciliation.
On reconciliation?
Yeah.
Well, this has been a weird one because all of the surveys of DC insiders have broke down on partisan lines. Like Republicans have said no chance, Democrats have said it's a lock. But I mean, I don't see any of the big problems having been solved. Like you still have suburban Democrats wanting their state and local tax exemption back, but the Senate saying no chance in hell, no tax credits for rich people. You still have Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, and rank and file Democrats having like wildly contradictory priorities. And you still have inflation that's absolutely ripping. So I am not convinced that this is going to happen. So I was nervous for a little while, but I think, with the worst inflation in 40, however many years, I think Joe Manchin has all the space he needs to get out of this. And I think we haven't even heard from Kyrsten Sinema. Like the absolute ice queen has not said a word. And I think end of the day, even if Joe Manchin signs on the bottom line, not saying he's going to do it. Okay. Kyrsten Sinema, he's just handing the flaming bag of dog shit to Kyrsten Sinema for her to kill it. Democrats aren't raising taxes before this election. Joe Manchin is not adding more to inflation. I challenge anyone to a test of manlyhood who thinks that this is going to pass.
Well, what about Zubby?
Zubby, well, I mean, look, give him his due. Like he pitched an absolute shutout here. We haven't really been using the US ICA, we haven't been talking about that on this podcast. I just feel bad because, the guy's pitched an 8-inning shutout from his last appearance is absolutely many money. I just know that I'm going to hit a grand slam home run on the last pitch of the Senate session when this bill dies. And that's what people are going to remember. They're going to remember Zubby giving up the grand slam home run when he just pitched a perfect game except for one.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't have a strong view on this. I will say, though, that the fact that Biden has not been able to work out a deal already, it's not like the news cycle has gotten any better for him.
Right.
So I think you're probably right. Like I said, from what I can tell, the market price sounds about right to me. I will say to your other question, here I have a stronger view. I think that the markets, like they often do, like they often have, are just considerably kind of underestimating Biden's resilience. I mean, right now, it's 33% to win the Democratic nominee, considerably lower to get reelected. To me, I think that's a pretty obvious buy for a few different reasons. Number one, I mean, a big question is whether or not he even wants to run again. On that, I think he's been pretty clear. He's been telegraphing everywhere that he has every intention to run again. And so then the question becomes, well, assuming that he wants to run again, what are the reasons why he wouldn't be the nominee? And I think that there are basically three reasons on the table. I think one is he has a health crisis. We can get into that.
Yeah.
The second is he has some kind of a major scandal or so forth. We
Yeah.
can dig into that. Or the third is that there's some kind of a viable alternative to him who can pose a very serious challenge to him in the primaries. I mean, all of these are options, but do I think they're a 67% chance? Absolutely not.
No. Listen, okay. He's an incumbent president. Like, just keep that in your head. And it's only a matter of time. Like, we've been joking about how terrible the campaign ads have been for some of these local Republican Senate primaries. Like, I think Josh Mandel in Ohio was like outwardly in his ads calling people beta cucks. I mean, it was like beyond parody. Okay. Wait until some of those people are running for president. I mean, like, I feel like, won't we get some polarization in Joe Biden's favor once there are national Republicans saying crazy stuff trying to win that nomination? Like, is that outlandish to think?
My view is that it's probably in Biden's interest for the Republicans to take both the House and the Senate. And that way, I actually think, just especially given how difficult it's been to govern over the Democrats right now, given how sort of incoherent the Republicans are in terms of their direction, I actually think divided government would probably work in his favor. But I mean, more fundamentally, like, I mean, who is in any kind of a position to wage a serious primary challenge to him? I mean, the markets right now are saying, Gavin Newsom, 20% chance of being the Democratic nominee for president. I just don't buy it, especially because, I mean, Newsom, I don't even know if he wants to run this cycle.
Right. I mean, being the governor of California isn't a bad job, especially when you're good looking. Like, that means you have access to banging movie stars just basically overnight. And I don't think DC has that cachet.
I mean, one thing I'll say too is, obviously, sort of analogizing to past presidents is kind of a risky way to bet. But that said, I mean, look at our recent incumbent presidents. I mean, with the notable exception of George W. Bush under the particular or unique circumstances of 9/11. I mean, none of these guys have looked especially good at this time in their presidency. And even Trump, I mean, who never was able to get above 50% in his approval ratings, all things considered, came pretty close to getting reelected. So
Right.
At these prices, I say absolutely buy Biden wherever you can.
Right. Okay, I hear you. So, Chogley theorem is Dems get nuked in November, looking pretty likely that that's going to happen. And that puts the Republicans in the position of having to say that they're for something and not just being like, yo, we're the party that like believes that women aren't a legal definition on paper, but like there's actually such thing as a woman. And then like, it's a lot easier to compete with Republicans when they have to actually say something that they're for. And, no one wants to play that game or something like that.
Let me offer one caveat, though. Although I'm saying go long on Biden, I do think that probably it would be worth hedging this one.
Yes.
And I think that there are a couple of ways that I'm interested in hedging this. So one is there's a market on predicted. Will Kamala Harris file to run for president before 2023? I've had buy orders there at 3%. And basically the idea here is that if something happens with Biden health-wise or whatever, sometime before 2023, I mean, that one spikes instantly. And I think that were she to become president, or it looks like Biden's not going to run again, I mean, unlike some of the other sort of potential candidates for president, I think she would basically announce a run right away.
I think if he has to get into a primary, like, he's done, don't you think?
If Biden does?
Yeah. I mean, he looks like a corpse.
Yeah, but it depends who it is. I mean, Bernie Sanders has already said he has no interest.
Right.
I don't think a guy like Gavin Newsom, who at the end of the day is an establishment guy, young, has plenty of time. I don't think he's going to do it. So I think that if anyone,
he's only getting sexier with his hair kind of graying a little bit. So it could work in his favor, right?
Yeah, but by the way, I mean, the whole slicked back hair thing, like, I don't get it. I think it makes him look really sleazy. Maybe
no. I think it makes him look like a bad guy in a Marvel film, and I'm all for that.
You think that plays among Democrats?
I think you know what? He's probably the modern version of like a guy in leather for Democrats. Like, just the fact that he's like a tall white male is inherently dangerous to progressives. So yeah, I mean, maybe if he could get a motorcycle too, it would totally clinch his position in the party.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, on Predict It right now, I mean, the markets are saying, the likely alternatives are Newsom, Harris, Buttigieg, Hillary. I mean, and then
That's a pretty weak list.
yeah, and then I mean, you have basically non-starters like Stacey Abrams at 4%. So
Right.
my view is that were Biden to face a primary challenge, I think it would come from basically one of two places. I mean, one, it might be like a progressive, symbolic kind of a challenger. I don't even know who that would be. Or it could just be someone like really random trying to build their national profile.
Right.
Maybe they'll take off or something, but that even a good scenario there looks like maybe they get 20%.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're back to one of the most underreported stories in history, which is those losses that the Democrats experienced in 2010 and 12 and 14 at the state and local level. I mean, it's just like a lost generation. There's almost no one to fill that void of all those people who got beat, in those bad years during the Obama presidency. It's just, I guess it'll just be years before that's kind of washes out.
Yeah, I will say to predict it, if you're listening to this, and also, well, let me see on I don't think Polymarket has a line on this yet either, but in any case, Governor Pritzker from is it Pritzker?
Yeah.
Yeah, Pritzker
Money
from
bags.
Illinois. He should be in any of these markets.
Right.
Yeah. Both Predict and Polymarket have not added him yet, as far as I know. So
Yeah. Especially if he starts
that
losing
would be
weight.
worth.
If he gets a little skinnier, he's thinking about it. Okay. All right. Well, let's move on. We spent too much time. I'm going to summarize this. Build back better. Hang the done chain on it. I think official forecast is the Senate will pass that election bill that makes it impossible for the next vice president to nullify the vote like they wanted Mike Pence to. They'll call that their late session victory. They'll let Sweden and Finland into NATO. They'll call that a victory too. And these two sort of sack of shit bills just aren't going to go anywhere. You have spoken exhaustively and clearly about Joe Biden. What do you say we move on to Donald Trump?
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, all right. So according to a report in the Washington Post this past week, Trump's advisors, we're quoting them here, said there's, quote, a 70-30 chance that the former president will announce a run to return to the White House by Labor Day weekend. So 70% chance Trump gets into the presidential race this summer. Of course, this comes after Roger Stone told the press he'd announced in July. So like a lot of things out of Trump world, take it with a grain of salt. Meanwhile, the January 6th MAGA riot committee keeps holding hearings. And with that, the speculation also continues to grow that Trump will be indicted in the state of Georgia at a minimum. We talked about that with Zoltar this last week on Star Spangled Gamblers. So keeping it general here, these are two huge questions, whether or not Trump gets into the presidential race or whether or not he's indicted. Let me just ask you, Pratik, would you rather bet on, I don't know, trying to time Trump's presidential campaign launch, or would you rather bet, generally speaking, on when he might be indicted?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the first question to think about is whether or not these situations will happen at all. My view is that an indictment of Trump is very, very likely. I mean, I would say probably over 80% between Georgia and the federal indictment. So that one to me is largely a timing question. Whereas on the question of Trump running, I mean, he's certainly telegraphing that he's interested. But whether or not he will ultimately pull the trigger and do it, I think is a tougher question. The way that I would trade this one is I think that the markets are overreacting on the possibility, not necessarily of Trump announcing, but of announcing in the near future. So what I would do is try to short the possibility of Trump running, not with the intention of holding that particularly long, but I think that just the fact that the reason why I don't think he can announce quickly basically has to do with campaign finance implications. So like right now, I mean, he's getting a lot of different perks by not being an official candidate. Like I think the Republican Party is kind of working with him to fundraise and they pay for a lot of his legal bills and so forth. He doesn't have all that many disclosure requirements, all that basically he
So
has
what
to
you're
forego once he
what you're
starts
saying
to become an
is
official candidate. So I would say yeah.
What you're saying is once he's an official candidate, he can't fundraise so that he can refurbish his airplane, like we recently saw on Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, among many other things. So, what I would say is like right now on predicted, there's a market. Will Trump file to run for president before 2023? What I would say is buy no right now in the low 40s. And I mean, I think the market is going to kind of inch up by the end of this month, and I would even say kind of hold it at least through like mid-August or something, kind of approaching Labor Day. I don't think Trump's going to announce that early, but if it looks like he might be, you can bail. But I think that you can just kind of buy the panic and then sell it once the market stabilize a little bit.
So hold on, can I slow you down for a second here?
Yeah.
So we just had Zoltar on this podcast saying Trump won't get indicted. Are you just at odds with Zoltar? I thought you guys were friends.
Well, if I recall that episode, I think what Zoltar is saying is he thinks Georgia indictment is very likely, and I agree with him there. I think that's more or less an eventuality. It's only a timing question. And by the way, I agree with Zoltar too that I don't think that's going to happen by September 1st,
Okay.
which is the predicted deadline.
Okay.
I think that probably Zoltar and I have a bit of a different view on the possibility of a federal indictment. I mean, in fairness to Zoltar, a lot has changed, but when you look at the new evidence that came out in the last hearing of the January 6th committee, I mean, you now have, on top of everything else, indications that Trump is engaged in witness tampering and so forth. So my sense is that probably Garland is going to indict, but I don't think
bold,
it's
dude. That is bold that a sitting president will indict his predecessor.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if he wants to do it, but I just think it's so overwhelming at this point. I don't really think he has a choice. And I think that market probably spikes after the Georgia indictment. So I think that the way that I would trade this one is to go on Polymarket, and there's I mean, they have different options on like by when Trump would get indicted. You can get Trump to be indicted by the end of the year in the high 20s by December 31st. That's a pretty attractive price to me. I don't think necessarily hold that one to the end, but I think that the markets are severely discounting the possibility of a Georgia indictment or even a federal indictment. And I think there's a good chance of getting a good payday on that one.
Okay. So like walk me through. I'm trying to like head fake the head fake here, because I feel like the one thing Democrats can agree on is that like a world where Donald Trump is the president is not a world worth saving. So if they were to indict Donald Trump, like wouldn't that create a situation where Donald Trump would be kind of a martyr and fundraise off of it? So like maybe it's a don't pet a sleeping dog situation, or do you think that White Houses actually care about the rule of law and it's important for them to follow the Constitution? I know it's been very controversial that the Supreme Court has actually been ordering the Biden White House to follow the Constitution, but maybe in this case that's it's a good idea for them to keep not following it and not indicting Trump or something. Or I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. You're the one who knows about this.
Well, so I mean the internal dialogue that you had there, I think, is probably the kind of discussions that were happening in Nancy Pelosi's office in the context of impeachment.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is sort of the problem for Trump, and I think what the markets are missing is that this is far less of a political question than it is a legal question at this point. So I mean, where I see basically vulnerability, I mean, in other words, so you have a bunch of lawyers with a legal obligation making these decisions, which is a very separate question from the politics. I mean, I think basically you have three vulnerabilities for Trump. You have Georgia, which I think is the most imminent. There, the prosecutor has made it very clear and has every political incentive to go forward with this, and I think has a strong case. Then you have Merrick Garland and the DOJ, and I think that insofar as Garland was reluctant to indict, I don't think he's going to have much of a choice after the referral comes from the January 6th committee.
Yeah.
It's just been too much. And then the third, and no one's really paying attention to this, which is in New York, even if you assume that he's not getting indicted criminally, people aren't really paying attention to the fact that Trump is going to be under oath in the civil trial there. So I think that's a bit of a sideshow, but the point is that his legal problems there haven't really gone away either. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. All right. So we're promising that we're going to get on to Chuck Schumer's COVID and that insane exchange between Josh Hawley and whoever that crazy law professor is. But I want to belabor this one last little bit here, which is we've really glossed over the idea that Trump's going to run for president, which isn't exactly settled science here. And I don't know the campaign finance law here. And I think it's important because what is Trump's income stream if he can't continue to fundraise from his base? And to me, that's an important thing here, which is like, how can he suck as much money out of his followers before they move on to a new shiny object as possible? And does that require him to run for president to continue to take money from them? Do you know anything about that?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I think actually we should spend a little bit of time on this, looking at like what are the rationales for running early versus not,
Yeah.
because that's kind of the core question here. I mean, from what I can gather from these press leaks and so forth, I think what the rationale is for an early announcement is basically to use this as kind of a strategy to stave off a lot of Trump's legal problems. So you're seeing like reports coming from inside Trump world. They want him to announce before Lindsey Graham would testify in Georgia, for example, or that would be kind of the picture there. The other would be to
like they want to make him into a martyr, like we were just talking about.
Yeah, like raise the political stakes, I think, of
Right.
an indictment, but also perhaps equally important, which would be to send a warning shot to other Republicans about that there are going to be consequences to speaking out
Right.
against Trump. So I think that's the pro side of it. I think there are two compelling reasons, though, for him not to announce. The first is that I think this is the last thing that national Republicans want going into a friendly year in the midterms.
Yeah, but since
I mean,
when does he care about them?
I think that he has always cared and will continue to care because so much of the party apparatus now actually matters to him. I mean, we're not talking about a early 2016 situation where he's just kind of the lone guy on the outside. He's in fact highly dependent on maintaining a grip over the Republican Party. So I do actually think he has to think about.
Well,
but
here's something everyone's bitching about. I've been in DC for a little bit. Is Trump raises like 100+ mil a year off of the standard GOP platform. So like having Trump in the mix is a net suck on other Republican candidates because he just raises and disperses so much money of his own. So like, why wouldn't they want to push him out so that they can just, get on the grift train and keep that money for themselves?
I mean, there's no question that I think the vast majority of people in DC right now don't want Trump to run. And I think that if Trump runs, I mean, this entire narrative about Republicans going soft on him, I mean, I think that story is going to change very quickly because almost overnight, he's going to go from being like someone who, sort of allows them to navigate or he's kind of essential to them keeping their job. But the minute he's standing in the way of them running for president, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that a whole slate of people are going to run for president in 2024, and I don't think they're going to hold back.
This just sounds like the beginning of like a season of The Wire or something, where like the Avon Barksdale or like the heavy hitter drug dealer gets out of prison after being gone for a few years, and there's just an absolute bloodbath in the streets for like who controls Iowa and who controls New Hampshire and who controls the Chamber of Commerce, and like that it's gonna be ugly if he gets in.
Yeah, I mean, look, think about like the people who are going to be running for president, right? Like very few of them have an imminent reelection to think about in their home state. So what does it cost them to go after Trump? I mean, I think this is the time they'll do it. I do think I want to briefly mention the campaign finance side of it. So there are two sides of the coin here. As I talked about just now, I mean, there are very bad consequences financially to getting in any earlier than you have to, which is why, candidates go through the process of having an exploratory committee doing all of that. The other side of it, though, is that if Trump goes out and says that he's running, which is entirely possible given just his penchant for not being disciplined, he could be in terrain there where he may be forced by lawyers to announce earlier. But I think it's much more likely than not that he's ultimately going to follow the advice of his campaign lawyers and delay the announcement as long as he can.
Okay. All right. That is gold. Let's move on. We're giving ourselves a long leash. Our audience is entitled to a quicker sprint. Let's talk about Chuck Schumer. We're really just talking about all the big dogs this week. So two truths and a lie about Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, Democrat from New York. Chuck Schumer has COVID right now, so the Senate is even more of a shit show than it is historically. Two truths and a lie about Chuck Schumer's life. Very powerful man that we need to understand. First, it is 2022. Chuck Schumer still uses a flip phone. He's hitting you from that razor, bro. Truth number two, Schumer actually ran for Senate at the suggestion of Geraldine Ferraro. So that was Walter Mondale's VP pick, a woman who was kind of a big deal in New York politics. She was the one who pushed him into the Senate race when he thought he was a little too young, but guess what? He won. And then lastly, Chuck Schumer's tied with Teddy Roosevelt, the Teddy Roosevelt, for the youngest member of the New York Assembly in its hundreds of years of history. Do you want to take a whack at that? Two truths and a lie?
Well, I'm not sure about any of these.
You don't think he's a flip phone guy? Like he's kind of, he's like a teacher's, sixth grade teacher glasses guy. He's got like the funny Brooklyn accent guy. Like, don't you think that guy might have a flip phone?
Yeah, but he's such a media whore, and like he seems to be a pretty smart guy. I mean, given all the opportunities of getting press with new technology, could he really forego that? I don't know.
That's true. Also, if he wanted to be very Brooklyn and very retro, he could be a pager guy instead of a flip phone guy.
Yeah, I mean, look, a guy, who lives in a sophisticated part of the country. I mean, I would almost think it's actually harder to manage a flip phone than just like upgrading. So
well, you could also just be big time and just not answer anyone's calls. That's an alpha move.
If you had told me that about like Ron Paul, maybe, but I think Schumer cares a bit too much. I'm gonna say that's a lie.
You're sure of that? Like you're not gonna give him? He got that perfect SAT score, so maybe he was the youngest guy ever elected in New York State history.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that the phone is probably a lie. I'm not totally sure, but we'll go with that for now.
Okay, so I can't talk you into anything, or I can't sell you Geraldine Ferraro trying to, be his mentor or some, bullshit like that.
I mean, those sound plausible to me.
Okay. All right. Well, you know what? You're a fucking moron. Chuck Schumer is famous for his flip phone, dude. It's the only thing they talk. Every time they talk about Chuck Schumer, just open your eyes, bro. They're always talking about his flip phone.
This is why I don't bet on the Hill.
It's really easy. Just do whatever I say and read Politico. Boom, you're rich. Big flip phone guy, Geraldine Ferraro. Well, he actually ran against Geraldine Ferraro in his Senate primary and beat her pretty handily. So big upset there. Chuck Schumer is in fact tied with Teddy Roosevelt for being the youngest member of the New York Assembly in its long and storied history.
This makes me like even more depressed about American politics than I was already. I mean, we have this monopoly of really old politicians in every leadership position. Like, if you're not regularly using an iPhone, I mean, I can't even begin to imagine like what you're missing about the world.
Embrace debate, though. Like 99% of serial killers use iPhones. Like 99% of terrorists use, Google smartphones. It makes me very sure that he's not a serial killer or a terrorist because he's not using the same technology as them.
Well, yeah, but he has his hands on state power.
Yeah. Well, but also I'm a lot stupider because of Instagram. So, maybe he's just getting smarter.
Not to go on a big tangent there, but maybe that is actually the answer as to why so many old people are in positions of power. Maybe they can actually concentrate like 30 minutes longer than everyone else, which just kind of adds up to a real advantage.
Yeah. What do you like? My actual attention span is maybe 2 to 3 minutes. Like I can type like 3 sentences before I need to check Twitter. What about you?
It's not much better, which is not good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. You want to play Kill Fuck Mary?
Sorry?
You want to play Kill Fuck Mary?
Well, before we move on from Schumer, there is a market on who will be the next Senate Majority Leader, which obviously is correlated to which party you think will control it. But the
Yeah.
market seemed to be, there are at least some traders who think that even if the Democrats hold the Senate, that they might get rid of Schumer. Do you have a view on that?
No, I don't think they'll get rid of Schumer. Who are they going to replace him with? Dick Durbin?
I mean, I have no idea.
I think the more interesting.
I don't think they will either.
Yeah,
I mean, unless he wants to retire.
The most interesting. Yeah, that's not happening. The most interesting market in that space is the who will be the Senate Majority Leader on February 1st, 2023. Wait, did I get that right? No, I didn't. Anyway, no, I'll shut up. It's not an interesting market at all. It'll be Chuck Schumer or Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think McConnell's going anywhere. So.
Right. All right. So now can we play Kill Fuck Mary?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So this we're gonna kind of go into the C-SPAN and Twitter archives of the week to elucidate a story that I think is actually very telling. So if you haven't already seen it, you can find it really easy if you just Google like Berkeley professor Josh Hawley. But there was this amazing dust up at this abortion hearing between Senator Josh Hawley, who is the young Missouri guy who's famous for kind of arguably instigating the January 6th riot by being the first senator to say he would vote to not certify the election. He's that guy. And because he's that guy, he's sort of synonymous with sort of the worst of Republican excesses recently. I'll just say that and leave it here. And he stars opposite in this story from Berkeley Law, like the University in California, Berkeley Law professor Khiara Bridges. And the substance of this conversation was Bridges was telling Hawley that men can get pregnant. And when Josh Hawley was like, that's kind of weird and crazy, her response was arguing with her was tantamount to like violence, and that he was contributing to violence by disputing that men could be pregnant or something like that. So really we got to see like the kind of extremes of liberal and conservative overreach clashing with each other for a few minutes here. And in a sense, that's sort of like what voters are going to have to grapple with, right? Like they're like, this is what we see represented on TV of our two political parties. The center is probably more sensible than this, but like this is the choice that voters are going to make. So I'm going to ask you to kill, fuck, marry 3 possible conclusions from watching a Berkeley law professor say that men can get pregnant and an election denier take the other side of that argument. Does any of this make sense?
Yeah, and by the way, for those who didn't follow the story, what Keen just said is not an exaggeration. Literally, the professor accused Hawley of using language that was like violent in nature, and they had a whole back and forth about that. So
it was
check it out.
It was absolutely crazy. It was beyond parody. Okay, so 3 possible resolutions. We're gonna kill, fuck, marry them, but not the human beings. Okay, first one. Number 1, Republicans are gonna win the Senate this election because at the end of the day, anti-democracy, pro January 6th Republicans are really they're just like a Fox News thing. They're not really involved in people's lives, whereas like crazy woke people interrupting you and correcting your speech and saying men can get pregnant are really annoying and are a fixture in our lives. So, woke people more annoying, Republicans will win the Senate. Explanation number 2, the Dems are going to win this election. They'll lose the House, but they'll hold the Senate, maybe hold a couple key governor's races. They're going to win this election and overperform because the Republicans still have way too much Trump stink on them. The MAGA vibes are real and people just aren't ready to trust Republicans again. And there's plenty of literature to suggest that. And 3, this whole exchange doesn't matter at all, because at the end of the day, the election is just a referendum on Joe Biden. And, as his fortunes go, so too will the election. Do you want to throw any of those out? Go ahead.
Yeah, I do want to throw the third one out. And I think that especially from a gambling perspective, the reason to me that it at least may matter a little bit is because I think there's actually a rationale to buy Josh Hawley lottos at 1% on running for president. And this dovetails sort of nicely with our earlier conversation. I mean, Hawley to me is kind of the epitome of someone. He was certainly ready to accommodate and be a toady for Trump, while he was a U.S. senator and Trump was the president. But I think ultimately he's someone with presidential ambitions, and I don't think that he's going to be deterred from running or hold back necessarily, regardless of what Trump does. And you're already seeing that Trump Hawley dynamic playing out a little bit in the Missouri Senate race, where Josh Hawley endorsed Vicky Hartzler, but Trump has now ruled out the possibility of doing that. So
he endorsed the incumbent, who's kind of a longtime Republican in the House, but Trump is still flirting with that. Who's the guy who like beats his wife and like parades around with guns saying you should kill rhinos or something? Isn't that who's that guy?
Eric Greitens.
Okay.
Yeah,
So Trump might still endorse the wife beater, kill other people guy.
Yeah, I mean, the markets think that more likely than not, Trump's going to endorse Eric Schmidt, who is the front runner. But the point is that Hawley, regardless of what he does, he and Hawley are on a different side. And so the question then is, well, how is Hawley going to wage a national run for president? And I think it's exactly what you've said, that he wants to get over the stink of the January 6th kind of thing and do it with culture war clips like that. So I do think it matters.
I'm kind of on the other side. I was actually going to marry number 3.
What's the argument?
Well, I was going to marry it because, I mean, you just like look at every poll, like the things people care about are inflation, gas prices. I don't know what the polling term is for like runaway wokeness, but I don't really think that there's that big of a constituency in this country for people who actually think that like there's no such thing as sex or gender, or, you know, like affirmative action is very unpopular in America. You know, like all these kind of like woke priorities are just like, there's not really a constituency for them, but there's a huge amount of concern about what, you know, just kitchen table issues. So I think that ultimately it might be inconsequential, this exchange.
So I think where I would take partial issue with that, though, is that you sort of, it seems like no matter how bad Biden's, first of all, I mean, I agree with you that I think culture war excess is part of the reason why Biden's approval ratings are low. But what you're also seeing is that in the Senate races, Democratic incumbents, Democratic nominees are polling considerably higher in many cases than Biden. And on the flip side, many Republicans who should be well positioned to win, notwithstanding the fact that they have a Biden advantage, just are not doing very well.
You're simping for number 2 right now, Pratik, that the Trump stink is very much still on Republicans.
Yeah, I think so. So the reason I would probably marry that one, not because necessarily I think the Democrats are going to hold on to the Senate, but the way that I am betting that insight is if you go unpredicted and look at the market, which 2022 Senate race will be the closest, I think these prices are actually very much off, because the markets are basically saying there's a 25% chance it's going to be one of Georgia or Pennsylvania. And to me, I mean, those two races actually stand out and are distinguished in my mind from places where the Democrats actually have pretty strong candidates and where you can really envision a full-on Republican meltdown in the case of Herschel Walker and Dr. Oz. On the other hand, I think that because of the national environment, because of the woke stuff and so forth, I think that there are other Senate races that should not be close, do not look like they will be close, that in fact could tighten. And that's why
can I try and predict which ones you're going to say?
Yeah.
I think you're going to say maybe we'll see a Ted Budd meltdown in North Carolina. I think you're going to say that like maybe Michael Bennett is just a little bit too broy in his boat shoes for Colorado. And what's his face? Joe O'Dea might give him a scare. And I think you might also be talking about Ron John in Wisconsin, maybe not being the man for the moment to hold for the Republicans.
So I actually haven't followed North Carolina that closely, but I mean, I would say I am actually interested in all of these. I mean, I think, you know, Nevada, you have actually a good Republican nominee, but you have a good Democratic incumbent senator in a state where, you know, Democrats have a good machine. But I mean, I think Arizona could be very close. I think Blake Masters is a problematic candidate. New Hampshire, I think that, you know, that one, right now it doesn't look close, but the Republicans could come up with.
What's going to happen is election day is going to come, and Like, I think all of these ones you're listing are going to go one way or the other. Like, I think it'll either be like, I don't think it's going to be like the Republicans and Democrats split the states you're talking about. I think all of these states will fall the same way.
No, I disagree. And I certainly wouldn't bet that way. So, for example, you look at Missouri. I mean, even if you think Grayton's probably is not going to win, I mean, this is, I think, a good way to hedge by that one at 3%, because I think if Grayton's does emerge as the nominee, even Missouri could be close. I mean, Ohio, I don't at all take it for given that J.D. Vance is going to win by a big margin. I mean,
Oh
the
my
polling
God.
certainly.
When did you get so woke, dude?
Well, I mean, the polling is showing JD down right now. Like now, I think the
Just
mark.
just,
Yeah, go
just
ahead.
just wait until that Peter Thiel money hits the air pumping him. Like Tim Ryan has been around the block. He's not going to be a U.S. senator. That's just name ID early in the race.
So to be clear, all I'm saying is buy Ohio at 4% to be the closest race. I think that's considerably
Wow,
underpriced.
woke critique here.
Yeah, Colorado, I would take at 6%.
Yeah.
So anyway, I mean, I think definitely look at that market if you think that the national environment won't completely nuke the Democrats.
You know what state, like, the biggest dissonance between state level guys and national guys I can tell is? Like,
what's that?
I haven't met anyone in Pennsylvania who has any doubt about Dr. Oz. Like, they all think he's the guy and he's just going to win that in a walk.
Well, look, I mean, Fetterman's health certainly isn't helping his case there.
No. No.
But you're saying people in Pennsylvania are telling you Oz is going to win easily?
They say basically what Charles McElwee told us here, which is like Oz on YouTube sucks, but like Oz in person and like Oz as a retail politician is just like a fiendish weapon of persuasion, and that haters just don't understand what he's like on the ground.
Yeah, but I mean, isn't that also what people say about Fetterman?
Yeah, but Fetterman's running uphill.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think, right now the markets have it at like a 56-44 Democratic advantage. Maybe we're starting to get too high on the Democrats there, but But I mean, the other factor to think about in Pennsylvania, the Republican gubernatorial nominee is a total nutcase, Doug Mastriano.
Truly. Yeah.
I just kind of think the Republicans they have a lot of self-inflicted wounds there, and this is kind of two races they probably should win that are not a given by any means.
Right. Okay, so I think, well, you have killed my bride, which is none of this stuff really matters that much. I am going to it's kill fuck Mary. Dems will get another chance of power because Republicans still have. Yeah, I think I'm going to spend at least one night in a sleazy hotel room with Republican stink is going to haunt them a little bit in this election. And that just leaves woke is more annoying than MAGA. So Republicans have an advantage. I guess we both killed that. Or did you already kill? You already killed the one I liked. So which are you going to fuck?
So the first one was
Republicans win the Senate. People are tired of woke stuff. And, January 6th Republicans are just a call-in phenomenon on Newsmax.
Yeah, I mean, look, I still think probably Republicans, I think you have to regard them as having the edge to take both the House and the Senate. I mean, whether you buy that at the current market price, I don't know. But I will say, as I argued before, I don't think Roe v. Wade is going to save the Democrats. I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot in the news cycle right now that really matters.
Yeah.
But I do think, as we talked about, I mean, let's say Trump decides to do an October surprise and announce at that time or something. I mean, something on that magnitude, a Trump indictment. I mean, there are things that could happen to shake things up.
Boy, that would be throwing such a bone to the Dems if he got into the race like a week before Election Day.
Yeah, and I mean, this is part of why I don't think Garland is looking to indict before the midterms, but I think a Georgia indictment absolutely is in the cards before the midterms.
All right, well, there you have it. A little kill fuck Mary with long explanations about the electorate. And I guess I'll leave it at that. Did I miss anything? We're sort of at the end of the show, and then we're just going to go to KJ and get the update on Westminster. What did I miss?
I think we're good.
I think we're good. I think we're great, buddy. Okay, well, Pratik, as always, thank you for joining. Thank you for not saying goodbye to your fans and adoring listeners.